everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Teardown, season number 8 of this podcast. My name is Jeff Gluck, along with Jordan Bianchi. We are motorsports writers for The Athletic still, Jordan, amazingly enough. And we are here on what I think is a monumental day for NASCAR, the sport that we all follow so closely and care so much about. We have just learned about a new NASCAR playoff format, and it's an old playoff format, but it's one that I think is going to be well received. So far, it seems like it from social media. The chase has returned. The 10-race chase for the Cup is what they used to call it. It is going to be 16 drivers now instead of the old 10 and 12. 16 drivers, 10 weeks. Whoever has the most points wins. And it's a lot simpler to explain than the old elimination format that we had. We just got done with the news conference down at NASCAR's new production facility, and both of us drove up here to Junior Motorsports Dirty Mo Media Studios. And so now I'm here with Jordan. Jordan, what are you thinking after what we just experienced down at that news conference?
I think you hit on it when you said this is a lot easier to explain. And you heard Steve O'Donnell say it today, and he told me this as well when I talked to him for a piece on The Athletic, was I want to be able to explain this format to somebody in an elevator from by the time I get on the ground floor to the 20th floor. So just a minute or two, right? And I want it to be a simplistic, straightforward, easy to explain points championship race. And that's what they have. That's what this format is. It is straightforward. There's no cutoffs. There's no points resets every 3 races. It's all of these things that are just basically go do the best you can on a single given week, every single given week. And if you can do that, you're going to be rewarded for it. We're going to dive way into this and the particulars and everything. But I think it's also important to say this is a really good compromise between basically, I would almost say like 2 factions, if you will. You had the people who were very adamant about the season-long format, and then you had a group over here like, no, we want a playoff. We want a playoff, and we kind of, we're not in favor of eliminations or as many eliminations or maybe a little bit of tweaks here and there, but we want some form of a playoff. I really think NASCAR did a really, really good job of balancing the interests and the desires for both parties, and I think this hits on it very, very well. It's not a slam dunk by any means. There's little things that maybe I could change, but that's really easy to nitpick. I think overall NASCAR deserves a lot of credit for bringing the industry together and finding a common ground and a championship format that I think a lot of people are going to be okay with.
I'm honestly elated. I can't believe it, actually. I really cannot believe that this happened. Sitting a year ago, as I've mentioned before, I got to participate in the playoff committee, the first playoff committee meeting, and they talked about it in the news conference today. The very first speaker was Mark Martin of the whole committee. Okay, who wants to, we're going to open up the floor now. Mark Martin gets up. He was remote at the time, but he gets on the Zoom and he starts talking about 36 races. And I can tell you the feeling in the room was just like, why is he, this is not going to happen though. This is not realistic. Like everybody was like, it just felt like there was just no chance that you were going to get anything other than some sort of tweaks to eliminations. And in fact, in the room at the time, it was, hey, a lot of people started expressing their ideas and all that stuff. And it was, hey, that's great, but we still need eliminations. And it just didn't feel like this 10 races was even going to be a possibility. So from that standpoint, it just was like to fast forward now a year later and see how everything progressed. And I think, let's not discount this goes hand in hand with the format. And I think this is very important to mention. We haven't mentioned it yet. Win and in is dead. Win and in is gone. And so had you done this format, 10 races, 10 weeks, whoever has the most wins, okay, you would have had a lot of people pleased with that. But the fact that win and in is gone, and it's going to be the top 16 in points that make it, no wild cards, it's the 16 best drivers of the year, period. Those are who are in, and they're going to race it out. That is as close as you can possibly get to the season-long points format, which is what a lot of people did want, and some people sure will be disappointed. Now I'm running a poll, and last I looked, 9%. I thought it would be higher. 9% said they do not like the format.
Wow, I thought it'd be higher too. I'm surprised. But that's really good to see though. And it speaks to, I think, NASCAR recognizing like, hey, we need to make some changes, but let's finding, again, that common ground. And it's nice to see 9%. That's for social media, that's a crazy, low number. And I'm really impressed by that and very surprised. And you talk about, whether this was going to happen or not. And you brought up Mark Martin, and you were obviously there, and you were in the meetings and everything as this went along. And there was momentum building up through the course of the summer. And that first meeting, as you said, like they put out the survey, and only one person responded, "Hey, we really want a season long points championship." That person was Mark Martin. But then like that momentum kept building for it. And by summer, there was some real push for it. And, it was on the table for being considered. And even when NASCAR was well down the road with a format, and the 3-3-4 was the one that they were kind of settled on, if you will, or kind of said, okay, I think this is the direction we're going, because this is going to, get rid of that one race championship finale, which a lot of people just did not like. And that seemed to be the kind of the bridge too far, is we're going to eliminate that, and we're going to have 3 more races to that final round. But then it was a step back of, I don't know. Like, maybe there's a different way to do this, and what's old is new again. And they ended up, going back to the chase. So it's good. It seems this is a really good step for a sport that the last year or so, even go back further to 2024 when Logano won the championship, there's just been this negative association about the playoffs, and everything has been about, this isn't working, we need to change. There was a conversation that dominated it last year. That's gone now. And it feels like this is going to usher in, hopefully, some positive direction for a sport that needs it a little bit right now.
Well, I remember when there was various, the first obvious suggestion was, let's just do a 3-race format, everybody, and it was just like, man, I don't think that's going to be enough. Like, the problems with the format and the 1-race championship and the rounds, a 3-race final round, even 4 was going to be okay, a lot better than 1, but that wasn't going to really solve the issue or move the needle for the fans that didn't like it, or the drivers that had been turned up. I mean, a big thing about this was the drivers in that room on the committee, and then the drivers speaking privately to NASCAR. The drivers were really out on that kind of format. I mean, they had lost a passion for it themselves in a way that was like, it didn't mean as much to them. And if they couldn't sell themselves on it, how are you supposed to turn around and sell the fans on getting excited about it? And what I thought was really interesting today, Jordan, was everything that we heard, whether in the news conference, which a lot of people saw streamed, or in the breakout sessions afterwards, it all felt and sounded very authentic to me. For instance, Chase Elliott said he was contacted by...
He said the same thing to me.
Yeah.
And it's a great quote.
Yeah.
It's a great quote. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
He said, listen, my people contacted me and said, hey, do you want to come, be a part of the announcement?
Yep.
And, drivers get asked to hype up the NASCAR talking points on occasion, right? We heard Denny Hamlin testify about that in the trial, right? So Chase Elliott says, I'm not going to go unless I really like it, because I'm not going to try to sell this unless I actually like it. And he loves it, right? Like, he's super passionate about it. He said the one tweak he'd make, and we'll talk about tweaks, but he thinks 16 drivers are too much. But other than that, what you have here is a breath of fresh air for the competitors, to where they're like, hey, if you're a good driver or you're on a good team, you're like, okay, I can go do this. I can control my own destiny. I like my chances now, where before it was like, yeah, we'll try to make get as many playoff points as we can, and hopefully we'll have a good buffer for when crazy stuff happens, and hopefully we can win a few races and get hot at the right time, and then go to the championship race and beat all the other guys and hope nothing crazy bad happens like it did happen to Denny Hamlin. And that's just not the competitor mindset. That was so far leaned toward the entertainment direction. And I think everybody obviously who is watching this has already heard that debate and felt that debate. But, this is just, to me, so much more authentic. We're not going to get to the end of the season and have this exhausting conversation every year. Well, did this guy deserve it? The way that they've laid it out is really great. And to me, I can't believe, honestly, that they said it's the 16 top drivers in points. I thought they do win an in, or at least they leave themselves a wild card to say, well, we can't exclude a guy like SVG. It's won 5 races, and it's like, well, if you didn't have a good enough season overall.
Look, can we have that conversation?
Okay, let's go for it.
So I hear the 16, and can I just real quick? I've heard this question a lot from people, and they're saying, why 16 drivers? And a couple reasons for this. One, this is the number that was in the previous system, so there's already contracts written with drivers, sponsors, teams, that kind of thing, and so it would require the teams to kind of go back and rework this. That was a big ask to do, and that thing. Other thing to keep in mind too, they looked at 16 in Major League Baseball. It's 40% of the field that makes the playoffs. In the NFL, it's 44%. 44 is the same number in NASCAR, 16 out of 36. So that's kind of in line with what you see in other professional sports. So I don't disagree. I think 16 is a bigger number than I would have agreed with. I would have gone with, but that is why they settled on 16. And I think when you hear the logic, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. So I want to talk to you about the win in your in, or not the win in your in, which is fine. Okay, you want to get rid of that, and that's fine. Though there's something related to that I would like to bring up. We talk about 16 drivers and no wild cards. The previous version of the Chase had 2 wild card spots. Mm-hmm. Would you been okay with a 14-2? And I say this because let's just use Kyle Busch as a reference in 2015. Kyle Busch misses a bunch of races because of an injury, comes back. He is, by every metric except for the number of races he started, had a championship worthy season. And there's sometimes things are going to happen. When I wrote this story in The Athletic, I was talking to somebody from Racing Insights, and they said, like, Brad Keselowski last year is a really good example of, like, you're beginning of the year, everything goes wrong, but you can save like 2 spots for the guys who win the most races. Would you have been okay with that, or you just want straight 1 through 16 points?
I think I would have been okay with it, and I kind of expected it, but I like this better. And I also actually think that 16, and somebody in my mentions, I was scrolling through my mentions. I'm usually much better about seeing the reaction today. It's been so busy, I haven't gotten to see what the overall feeling is, everybody's reactions to it. But there was somebody in my mentions, I was scrolling really quick, that said, 16 is actually good in the sense that, like, that could be a mulligan for, like, let's say, you have a driver, because there's been a concern, right? Like, well, if somebody gets injured,
Mm-hmm.
There's no waiver anymore. Well, we don't have to talk about waivers anymore, by the way. But so
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
That goes along with, like, the caution clock and some other things over the years.
Yeah, boy, I will not miss that. But like, let's say, the guy that's second in points has to sit out a race for whatever, right?
It's a suspension. We've seen that,
That's true too. Gosh, we don't have to talk about how a suspension loses all your playoff points anymore. No, RIP playoff points.
I was just gonna say, can we mention that really quick? No playoff points. Like,
RIP.
It's when we talk about simplicity in an elevator pitch, like, it is very clean cut on how this works.
So from that standpoint, you could actually say, okay, well, but having 16 drivers in the field actually allows somebody to miss a race or 2 and probably fall back and still make it. So I don't mind it from that aspect. And also from the 16 standpoint, that what I really like that they did, the gap is massive, absolutely massive between the points leader and 16th place. I think, what is it, 100 points, right? 100 points between the regular season champion and 16th. Mm-hmm. So the odds of 16th being able to overcome that, I mean, sure, you give them a chance to have a sensational 10 weeks.
And they used the Tony Stewart 2011 kind of championship run as the model for that, of, like, could a guy in 16th win the championship? Sure. But it's going to require a Herculean effort where nobody is going to doubt that this guy is championship worthy, because over 10 races, he was just absolutely lights out brilliant.
Yeah. And I think, I like that there's also a gap, like the regular season champion is going to get a 25-point gap over second place, which you go, well, over 10 weeks, 25 points is nothing, but that's 25 points. So think about how hard they would have raced before for the equivalent of 5 races worth of playoff points, right? Like, that is something where the top tier of the standings, they're going to be like, that matters to them. So, you're not just going to have the regular season, some guy get up toward first, second, third in points, but be like, well, I don't really care. I know I'm in the playoffs. I'm having a good enough season. I don't really care whether I get seeded 8th or 6th or 4th or 1st. Like, there's enough points stacked all the way through that I think it gives them something to race for. But it's also a big enough gap where you're like, man, I mean, those guys at the bottom, yeah, they're in, but they're going to have, something special to erase a bad regular season. So I like it from that aspect. And I just don't think that you need the wild card type element. And listen, we're sort of talking around it a little bit, but who does this affect most? It affects Shane Van Gisbergen, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
Yes. The era, we've talked so much on the show about the era of specialists, whether it's just road course ringers and SVG, obviously. I'd even throw like a Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in there and some other drivers who are really, really good on super speedways, and they kind of circle those moments as their chances to win. So those guys are the biggest ones impacted by this.
So there's a couple things about the SVG element of it in particular, right? Like, I believe, Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, the wild card came to be because Jamie McMurray won a bunch of races one year in the old chase,
yes,
and missed it.
2010.
And so he won Daytona and Brickyard that year. Correct. And maybe something else.
No, he won the Brickyard and Daytona, finished second some other races in like 600, for example, but didn't have the consistency to be high enough in the points. And then they changed it the next year. So
they said, okay, now we'll make a wild card where the highest winner that's not already in, blah, blah,
highest
blah,
two winners.
Okay. So SVG, he won 5 regular season,
four
regular
season races, 5 overall.
And so they've done a couple things, right? So they gave 15 more points to win a race now. So if you multiply, I mean, that's 60
points
right there. And you have to think, I mean, last year was, his rookie year. So he is getting better at the ovals, right? So he shouldn't be as low down in points. The bottom line is he's going to have a chance to make it. He's going to have a chance to make the top 16. If he keeps running well at road courses, keeps getting the points there, improves on ovals, he should have a chance to make it. If not, he wasn't good enough. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for people to say. I did talk to Justin Marks. I think that was an important person to hear from today. On the car ride up here, I gave him a call. He had just finished watching the announcement and was catching up. And he said, he 100% backs this system. He said it wouldn't change anything that he decided. He feels, first of all, as we just mentioned, SVG is getting way better on ovals. He's still going to be good on road courses. And look, sponsors love winning races, and there's going to be more of an emphasis on winning now. Like in terms of like the week to week conversation, we're going to be talking about the race winners more than, okay, this guy did this, and he took his playoff spot. It's going to be, wow, this guy went out and won this race, because that's going to be a much more emphasized part of the storyline, which is, again, the people that wanted 36 races wanted that kind of element. Steve O'Donnell in the news conference today said, we don't want the Daytona 500 winner getting out after this huge race and saying, we're in the playoffs. I mean, look at Bubba Wallace last year, right? The whole story, he wins the Brickyard 400. And the whole story is, you're in the playoffs. Isn't that great? It's the Brickyard 400.
Mark Martin. I talked to Mark Martin. I mean, interrupt really quick. I talked to Mark Martin for again, the story in The Athletic this week. And he mentioned Bubba Wallace by name. He mentioned the Brickyard. Like, when Bubba Wallace has this kick-ass moment, and he used kick-ass, and he goes to the Brickyard and wins the Brickyard 400, and there should be this incredible moment. He's like, well, the conversation was, well, he made the playoffs, and et cetera, et cetera. And it should be about, well, you won the Brickyard, you won this crown jewel race. And there was that conversation. But the point is that the playoff stuff overshadowed that or took away from the conversation. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that to some degree, but that is the thinking.
Well, listen, the narratives, and this is I think this is going to be a really fun year. I think it's going to be so interesting to talk about the strategy and who's up, who's down. I mean, we're going to get several races into the year, and again, there's no saving yourself, right? So let's say you have the Brad Keselowski type or whoever, somebody's going to wreck, some contender is going to wreck in Daytona and Atlanta. Those are the first 2 races, right? And then go to COTA. That's the 3rd race. Somebody's going to be in a points hole. And the narrative is going to be about, oh, this person is 34th in points or 30th in points. Can they dig themselves out of this and make the chase? How high can they get, right? And then you're going to have somebody that's off to a great start that we didn't expect because of super speedways. And instead of like, well, can they hang on to, we don't really know how far down the cut line's really going to move. Can they really hang on when there's all these different winners, and how many random winners will there be? It's like, this guy is 10th in points halfway through the regular season. He has got a great chance to make this if he has a great second half of the regular season. All these different narratives we're going to be talking about, and that's a breath of fresh air for me. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds. So we don't really know yet how this is all going to go and how teams are, maybe will they race differently? Will some guys back it down and say, hey, we can't go for this? Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott were really enthusiastic today about talking about the art of what they do. And, instead of making these crazy moves that cause chaos, which look, admittedly, team chaos over here, some people like that, right? But the drivers never really, I think, wanted to be in that position. They want to go do the traditional form of motorsports, and we're going to get much closer to that than we've seen in years. So from that standpoint, I just think it's you can tell I just have this I guess I'm sort of in disbelief still, but I'm just really excited about what we're about to see.
It's going to be interesting. One thing that we're not going to talk about anymore, we shouldn't have a conversation about anymore, is race manipulation and team owners in that last race, in a cutoff race of, is so-and-so from the same manufacturer going to back it down and help it out? We may to some degree, but I don't think you're going to see the instances that you saw to where it was so obvious, blatantly obvious, whether it was at a Martinsville or something like that. That is going to be a welcome change.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you on that one, in the sense that in the old chase, we did see quite a lot of teammates who were not in contention letting other teammates go.
But that's always going to be there. That is regardless of any format. You can even in a season-long points format, right, you are always going to have that degree. That is the life of having a team sport with multi-cars. I don't think there's any way you can ever police that. I just don't think the over-the-top blatantness that was it made it really ugly sometimes. I think that is going to be gone.
Yeah, and look, it depends how close the last few races are, right? We're sort of one of the big mysteries of this year, and no matter how far we get into the season, we're not going to be able to know until, the final few races. But is this going to be a situation where, hey, the championship race is back at Homestead, or the season finale? I don't know if you call it the championship race anymore. The season finale is back at Homestead. And is it going to be a case where, Jimmy Johnson goes into it that one year where I think it was him and Keselowski, right? And did he have to just finish 20th? But there was a strategy there for a minute where Keselowski had gotten ahead.
You're talking about 2012?
Oh, 2012.
It was the other way around.
Keselowski
had it
right,
basically in his grasp. Yes. And then they had some issues. I think it was on pit road, and they stumbled their toe. And there was one moment there where Johnson was kind of surging, and it flipped. But yeah, you're going to have those moments. But
so will it be like that where, hey, all you had to do was do this? Or will it be, 2004, the first year of the chase, the Kurt Busch wheel coming off at Homestead, all the crazy, there was 3, 4, 5 guys in contention that day for the title, something like that, something crazy. And it could have gone a bunch of different ways. And obviously, if Kurt's wheel doesn't come off onto the pit road or onto the track and cause the caution as he's coming into the pits, he doesn't win the title. We don't know what it's going to be like, but I have a feeling it's going to be close because even in the old chase, the championship was never decided before. It was never clinched before the last race. And with the next gen car, I really do think these teams are closer than ever. And also the diversity of these tracks is interesting, right? Like the schedule's already set. You do have a road course in there, which is the Roval. So maybe people like the Roval a little bit more now that it's the one road course in the chase. You have a super speedway in there. You've got some short tracks. You've got some intermediates.
You've got some short ovals, Gateway, Loudon, Darlington. Yeah,
Phoenix. You have to count Phoenix.
And can we bring this up? Is how does the championship rotation we've heard so much about, right? There's going to be this championship's going to be rotated, whether on a yearly basis or every couple of years basis between a handful of tracks. How does that work? Is this a thing now where maybe this isn't something that isn't it, I don't want to say as desirable, but is it, the idea was that this would kind of move around as a Super Bowl-esque thing that cities would build on. Is that still there? I don't know the answer to that question, but that's something to kind of look at of maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you just, you build the schedule how you think the best that it should be. And we're going to have this race be our season finale at a Homestead, for example, because it annually puts on the best show. And this is, we know, is going to be an entertaining race, and this is where the championship is going to be settled. And it doesn't matter about a one race finale. We just want to have it at at this track because we know this is where it should be.
I still think there's a lot to be said for moving it around, for having it somewhere different. And I do think it's going to be close. And by the way, remember it always used to be like Ford Championship weekend at Homestead. And you're going to have multiple series deciding their champion, crowning their champion. Although, if you probably would have looked at it last year, I'm sure Corey Heim probably would have clinched well before. Or
he clinched he clinched when he left Daytona in February.
Well, by the way, update on the poll. I said it was 9% no who don't like the new format now. Now it is 10%. So 8,200 votes so far. There's still 22 hours left to vote.
I'm shocked.
74% of fans saying they like the new championship format. Again, 10% said no, and 16% said not sure. Jordan wanted me to put a not sure.
I just thought there's some people that are going to be in this. Can we talk about our guest, by the way? Who's going to be on the show in a minute?
Our guest, yeah.
We haven't mentioned his name.
Well, I didn't want to jinx it, but we're hoping to have.
He already agreed.
Well, you never know, tech issues or something. We're hoping to have the aforementioned Mark Martin on the show in a few minutes because, listen, you talk about somebody who had a major impact, and we'll talk about it because I really truly believe this doesn't happen without him. So now, Jordan, I haven't gotten to read your story yet that you wrote for The Athletic, but it sounds like that is Jordan did a whole behind the scenes of how this all came together. I think he knows more than I actually did on how this
usually is the case. No offense.
Well, I'm saying that being on the committee, you would think I would know how this decision was made. Unfortunately, the last committee meeting was in September, so we all said our piece then.
I knew more about you, but the thing then I knew about this.
That's true. You did. So Jordan, tell us. I don't want to give your whole story away, but what are some of the things you learned for your story?
I'm trying to find this quote really quick, and I apologize, so just tap dance here. So you talk about Mark Martin's importance in this. And this is, and Mark's going to explain this, so I don't want to take away, but basically he says, I love it. I think it's a huge win for NASCAR. It's a huge win for the competitors. No one loses. It's a huge win for the fans. No one loses in this format. But we talk about his voice in everything, and I apologize. This is really bad as I'm trying to pound through this here. But he said, let me paraphrase, is that he said, listen, I heard the fans. I heard what a lot of fans were saying, and they wanted a season long. He goes, I consider myself a NASCAR fan, and they didn't have a voice, really. He goes, but I could be that voice. And he goes, I could scream the loudest, which I thought was a great quote. And you were there. You were there in that first meeting. And he was the only person who was really advocating from the beginning a season long points championship, and that momentum kept growing because he kept just hammering and making a case of why this would be. And it was like there was serious consideration given to this, varying levels of how close they came to actually saying that it was a season long. I don't know if they were like super close to that, but it did get serious consideration, and a lot of that the credit goes to Mark Martin.
Well, and I do want to say why because a lot of the committee people would have loved to have 36. And by the last committee meeting, that was what the drum was beating for 36, right? But everybody just didn't think it was realistic. And people just were like, I'm not even going to, it's almost like voting for like the write-in candidate or something. Like you're looking at the election and you're like, all right.
Don't talk politics.
This is like a couple people who are going to win. And I could either sort of throw my vote away, or, I can vote for one of the people who are probably going to win, right? And so it just didn't feel like, okay, well, this is not really a possibility that could even happen. They're just going to do some form of a playoff or eliminations in some way. And so, and again, you had voices in the room that said, like, this is great, but there will be an elimination, basically. So it just didn't feel like it was possible. So I think he wasn't going to take no for an answer. he certainly put the public pressure on. And he said today, he said, this is my biggest win in NASCAR. And so, yeah, well, hopefully we'll talk to him about that in a few minutes. But
I want to ask Mark about this when he joins the show. And I think one thing that NASCAR can do is there is a segment of the fan base who is going to just be ride or die season long, points format forever, right? And I don't want to speak on behalf of Mark, and we'll ask him when he joins the show. I think it would be advantageous for the sport to have Mark Martin be out front and be the cheerleader. I mean, inviting him today and being on a part of this press conference was a smart idea, honestly. And you need more of that. Like, you need him being the cheerleader for this format of why this is a good thing and why this is good for the sport. And I don't want to speak on behalf of Mark, but it seems like that would be something he would be comfortable doing and maybe even wants to do.
Well, I think he did want to be here today because he got on a plane and flew out here. And speaking of Mark Martin, he now is in the waiting room. So let's bring him in and have him join the show because, again, so much of this revolved around him. So we are so happy that we're here with us because you're such a key player in this and so important to what has happened here. You said it was your biggest win in NASCAR. And I do want to say, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but before the last meeting, you weren't going to be able to make it. I think you were driving somewhere. And so you and I had talked on the phone and you wanted me to convey a message to the committee. And because I think a lot of people are going to be like, man, Mark Martin is the 36 race guy. And you said, let them know I would absolutely be willing to settle for 10. I would be thrilled with 10. Nothing less than that. But that would do it for me. That checks the box for me. So first of all, welcome in. And can you explain why you were so enthusiastic about this format?
I think great to be with you guys, by the way. I had a lot of fun today. I think probably I would say the reason I was so enthusiastic is because I didn't think we would get it. I didn't even think we would get a 10 race thing. Obviously, you sit through the meetings. The first 2 meetings, I didn't feel like that did it for the race fans. I just didn't feel like they did it. So after the second meeting, knowing that we weren't going to be able to get to 36, my only compromise that I could support would be a 10 race chase.
Mark, why was it important for you to be here? Jordan was just talking about the opportunity for you to be a cheerleader for this. Why did you feel like it was important for you to get on a plane, fly to Charlotte, be at this press conference, speak out about this?
For me, number one, to be asked to be a part of the committee, even though I was pretty mad about, and I lost a lot of sleep over it. I was very frustrated, but it was an honor that they asked me to be on it. I was honored that it was a big victory for them to make such a bold move to go to a 10 race chase. I got most of what I wanted. And it was an honor, that NASCAR did that. Listen, man, when I raced, NASCAR didn't listen to a word I said, ever. And, once again, I want to drive home the point. This wasn't about me. I would have never entered this conversation with NASCAR had it not been for the fans. But the fans were not being heard. And I knew that I could scream louder than they could. So that's why it was important. It was important to me to show my support for what I thought was a good decision by NASCAR.
Mark, I was curious about this, as you've been obviously very enthusiastic about this format and the change here and everything. How does NASCAR win over that segment of fans who are just like ride or die? It's got to be 36 races for this championship. How do you convince them that, hey, this is a good thing for the sport and this is a really good compromise where really both sides win?
I hope that the ride or die guys will understand that this is very complicated. Race teams have sponsor contracts. There's television contracts. There's race teams that in racetracks for that matter. It was major to break away for NASCAR to break away from the playoff format and eliminations. Racetracks won elimination races. Who knows what television wanted? We said television wanted the playoffs. I think that at the end of the day, the playoffs and what they intended to do didn't deliver on that. When you're faced with an alternative of a 1 race or a 3 or 4 race runoff for the championship, or a 10 race, which is better for the 36 guys, which is better. We couldn't get 36. And by the way, you can get to 36 from 10 a whole lot easier than you can get from 1 to 36 where we were. So, maybe someday, 36 comes, but for now, this is so much better than the alternative. And it was a bold decision by NASCAR to do this instead of sticking with some sort of playoff format.
Mark, I know this is going to be the kind of thing that, it was talked a lot about in the committee meetings, right? Of like, you don't know whether this is going to move the needle or we don't know if this is going to increase ratings or viewership, but it seems like this is a long-term play. It seems like this is something that NASCAR's really got to stick with. If somebody clinches it early, or if somebody, if it's not, if somebody wins a few in a row, like they did with Jimmy, and how important from your perspective is it that they stick with this for a while and give it enough room to breathe, even if there's things that people feel like, should be tweaked or need to change?
Yeah, Jeff. Who knows what this does to ratings? I don't think it will necessarily increase the ratings. I hope it doesn't hurt the TV ratings, but we need to either have a sport that's about television, or we need to have a sport that is racing. And this gets us back to more of the core values of this 80-year sport of auto racing. And I'm not saying it's going to be more exciting, although it can. I'm not saying it's going to be. But the biggest positive thing I hear is Steve O'Donnell saying, we're going to have some fun. We're going to embrace who we are. That means, to me, we're not trying to be like football or basketball. We're going to be auto racing, and we're going to be the size that we are, and we're going to try to grow organically and, share with our kids and our grandkids, and maybe they grow up to be race fans as well. But, Steve said it, and I'll remind everyone that Steve said it. They made some mistakes in the past. They alienated some of the core fans, chasing new fans, and it didn't wind up being a net gain. So now let's get back to something that resembles the sport of auto racing.
Here's a question for you, Mark. What is the next cause of advocacy for you? And now you've had a central figure in reshaping the championship format. So what's next? What are we going to be advocating for next?
I don't know. There's plenty to work on, Jordan. That's for sure. But many of the things that need work are even more complicated than this one. And I'm learning more about that. I learned more about that today. I spent a good bit of time at the R&D Center with John Prost and Jeff Burton in deep discussions, technical discussions about the cars and all that stuff. There's lots of things that need work, but there are very complicated situations. As of right now, I don't want to take on any. I'll take on the next one that comes that shows itself that it needs my help. Right now, there's just, I'm just going to celebrate that's a big win, y'all. As a racer, I never got a point across to NASCAR. I did not have their ear. They never listened to anything I had to say. This is the first time that I remember NASCAR hearing me, and they heard the fans, and that's how the fans won. The fans win in this deal because even if they didn't get what they wanted in it, they get a lot of what they wanted, a lot more of what they wanted than they were going to get if they would have just, stayed quiet. Now, the one thing I want to say is I would love if everyone could learn how to disagree, politely and not be so vicious. There's so much negativity and so many people are vicious. You and I.
They are?
Agree, Jordan, on stuff, and it didn't get ugly. And I vow going forward that to be even more, have more, good debates that are reasonable and friendly. Debating is okay. Being vicious and ugly, we don't need that.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for coming on this stream. Sorry we had some audio issues. We couldn't hear half what you said, but I'll be excited to go back and listen to it. We'll see. I was asking you questions and not hearing the answer, but I'm glad I got to see you today. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for coming on here as well.
And I want to say too, Mark, appreciate the conversation. And I know we don't always see eye to eye on things, but I do enjoy the banter. I do enjoy the conversation, and it's nice to have a good dialogue.
Me on the show and for the work you do. And the one thing that we all share is a love for the sport and a passion for it. And, we're all alike in that way.
Very good.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, I think one thing that Mark says there is really important, and that, this has got to be sort of an inflection point, Jordan, for the sport. I think this has got to be something where sort of a reset, and we can take a step back now to recap, where we last left off. It was the day of the settlement. We were also here in Charlotte about 4.5 weeks ago. And we were in that hotel room right down from the courthouse. And we were just, wow, this settlement just happened. Permanent charters, all this stuff. And, we knew there was going to be some fallout. And that fallout included ultimately, recently, the departure of Steve Phelps, NASCAR commissioner. I made a YouTube video about this. I don't think that's what's best for the sport. You wrote a column about it. He is so respected
widely
in the broader sports landscape. Of course, in our bubble, everybody was very upset with him and mad at him for the Richard Childress comments and the stuff all the emails that came out, of course. And was he going to have to do a lot of repair work within the industry? Of course. But stepping outside our bubble, Steve Phelps, when you look at the TV executives and you look at the other sports commissioners, and he was the face of NASCAR to those people in circles that we don't all run in, right? And so that's going to be very hard to replace for NASCAR. And so, that's one departure. I don't know if we'll see any more, but what do you think about the Steve Phelps departure?
I think it's a loss for NASCAR, and I understand. Let me just say this: what he said about Richard Childress, offensive. Like you can't say that. There was work to do there to make amends, and Steve had made overtures to Richard and apologized publicly and privately, and I can understand. I see where NASCAR is saying, "Listen, we just got to make a change," but Steve deserved an opportunity to show that he could make changes, bridge the the gap that had happened there between the fans and himself, and maybe the trust that had been lost. He deserved that opportunity. He's done a really, really good job of leading this sport. He is the front-facing person of the sport, has been for a while. The CEO and chairman of this sport, Jim France, has never done a press conference, has never done a news conference since he's taken over in 2018. Phelps is out front. He is public. You see him on a weekly basis in the garage, on pit road, talking to people. And I think I understand there's a fan sentiment, and they're upset and they're angry, and I understand that. But when you talk to team owners and you talk to team executives across the board, they, to a person, told me NASCAR is worse off with Steve Phelps no longer here, because he's good to have him lead this sport, because he had the team's best interests at heart. He had pushing this sport forward and trying to make it better. He had great relationships with the teams. He had great relationships with partners on the marketing side, across the board. That's irreplaceable. That is a really, really hard thing to find someone who can do all of that. And he is, be honest, like, I understand what he said about Richard Childress. And again, there is no excusing that. He said what he said. He shouldn't have said it. But it also feels like he's paying for the sins of the sport overall and decisions that were made above him when it comes to the charter negotiations. Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell, NASCAR's president, were advocating for the teams. They were advocating, saying, hey, we've got to give a better deal to the teams. And frankly, the reality is if NASCAR had listened to the Steves, particularly Steve Phelps, I don't think this lawsuit would have gone forward. I think this thing would have been nipped in the bud years ago. But Jim France, who owns the majority of this company, had his own ideas and own decisions to make, and he decided that he didn't want to go down that road and go down a different path. And that path ended them up in a federal courtroom where they're on the wrong side of a settlement. I think this sport is worse off without Steve Phelps here.
So, as I was mentioning, I think all of this, so the post-trial, the fallout, everything that happened, the way the championship ended last year, and now turning the page to a new year, this new playoff format, which again, I feel people are going to be energized by, the competitors especially. It's really got to be this reset point, inflection point. And I think Chase Elliott talked a little bit about it today in the news conference. Mark, again, talked about it in the news conference as well. And I don't know how to articulate it the right way, but it's not like, everybody, stop being negative. It's not one of those talks. It's like, it's just got to be, let's take a step back for a second, because there's been so much divisiveness, whether it's leading up to the trial, leading up to this format announcement. There's so many things that have been wrong with NASCAR that people have identified with. I mean, Dale Jr. was talking today about how, the way this format was, for example, like it even left him feeling like he could take a couple races off or just catch the highlights in the summer and not be tuned in the whole season. And it made it hard for him to be as engaged. The trial's behind us, this format decision's behind us. If you're in the 10%, I understand certainly that people are upset, but we have to recognize now it's here for probably a decade at least, right? And I hope longer, because I hope it'll be successful, but it's not going anywhere. We learned during the trial, by the way, we understood all the financials now. We saw how complicated it is that goes behind the scenes in terms of making big changes. So the car's not going anywhere. The next gen car, it's not. It's just not. Financially, it's not. So a lot of things that people have been upset about have been issues that are being worked on, resolved, whatever. I do understand the sentiment from Chase Elliott, from Mark Martin, that it's got to move forward in a way. I mean, the sport has got to find a way. And again, we're always going to be saying, man, this sucks, or this is a bad call, or I can't believe they're doing this, or I would have liked to see this change. I'm sure we'll find something by the end of this week. We're going to the North Wilkesboro test tomorrow, and probably drivers will come in and say, you can't even feel this horsepower. We need more horsepower, and the tires aren't wearing out enough, or the short track package needs work, whatever. That's always going to be a part of it. But I think there's the way that the culture, and look, raise my hand, guilty as anybody, right? Like, in terms of, complaining about things and whining about things.
But like, what were the two big storylines we talked about so much last year on like on almost a weekly basis? One was the lawsuit and the potential fallout and the ramifications for that. That's done and settled with, and that's good. And if you go off of what was said on the courthouse steps, there's a lot of positivity. And much like how I think NASCAR really should use Mark Martin as kind of the voice for this new format and letting him be the cheerleader for this. I think you need to have a conversation with Michael Jordan and say, listen, man, can you come out and try to be an advocate for us? I'm not saying it on every week basis, but have him make him be front and center for the Daytona 500 and have him be the cheerleader for NASCAR. Man, this is a sport I love. I grew up a part of. I want to be a part of this. I'm here because I love it. And yeah, what happened, but I'm here because I want to be here. And here's why you should love it. Like, have him be that salesman and have him explain to people what is so good about that. And the other thing we've talked a lot about was the playoff format and all the negativity surrounding that last year, because that was the conversation. It seemed like every week, this is what sucks about the playoff format, this, that, and then whatever, right? But now that's done and over with. And so the two giant dark clouds that have just been festering over this sport for a year plus now are done. This feels like an opportunity to start fresh for this sport and to kind of figure out what it wants to be and set that path going forward to be what its best version of itself this year, next year, and years down the road.
But let's be clear too, because I think part of the reason that this sport has gotten itself in such trouble is feeling like it's got to sell things and feeling like it's got to push things. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like it's gotten itself when it's tried to be something maybe it's not sometimes.
But then they say, oh, isn't this just the greatest thing ever? Oh, isn't this decision just the greatest thing ever?
Yeah, and I agree we shouldn't do that. Like that is don't use car salesman me.
But so I think that when people, like, I personally feel, and maybe again, some people out there might disagree and be saying, man, I am sickened by everybody being so positive about this today, and everybody's just trying to shill it and all this stuff. But to me, this today, the reaction that we've seen is authentic. People are genuinely excited about it. And these NASCAR fans, more than any others, are very, very attuned to feeling like they're being sold something, to being like they're being pushed a storyline that is something they don't actually believe. And the people that are telling them this don't actually believe this, and they're just towing the party line. They're very attuned to that. They're very, sensitive to that and watching out for that. And I think that they are going to be able to pick up that when drivers are talking about this format, for instance, it's in a very genuine way. And that matters to people because they will then be able to get on board and invest in it and be excited about it as the drivers are. The drivers before in these playoff meetings and stuff, they weren't excited about it, right? And so, or a lot of them, I'm sure some were, but, so the closer you can get to like actually feeling like, hey, we really mean this, and this is like what's really happening, yeah, I think it'll take some time, but I think that like what I heard from Steve O'Donnell today, what I heard from Mark Martin today, this is the stuff that was really talked about behind the scenes. This was like the actual things that people were saying in the industry conversations that we would have in the garage, right? This was not BS crap trying to, okay, we got this new format. Let's try to sell the fans on it. Let's try to convince them of this. We don't really believe this ourselves. This was to me very authentic. And I hope that getting back to the roots, the hell yeah thing doesn't come across as we're trying to sell you on something, because it comes on, hey, this is us and this is what we believe. I think NASCAR will be better off if they go down that road.
I don't disagree with you, but I think if you have Mark Martin front and center saying, hey, this is why this playoff format is so good, it is authentic. It is coming from a genuine, sincere place. And I think if you have Michael Jordan saying, hey, this is why I love NASCAR. This is why I invested all of these millions of dollars in the sport. I don't have to be here. This is the sport I grew up watching with my father. That's authentic. This isn't some outsider saying, I'm just here just because I want to, it seems like a cool thing to do or whatever. This is someone who has a genuine love and appreciation for the sport, who, used to, his favorite team was Hoss Ellington's team, right? Like, that's real and that's authentic. And you're right. Fans can see through the BS sometimes, but having those guys share their passion for these things, that is authentic and that is real. And I think that is a good selling point, because it is okay to sell your sport if it is real and authentic. And having those guys be the voice and a salesman for this sport, it will do nothing but help this sport move forward.
Well, today I think is a great day and a great day to turn the page. But of course, it's not a page you can easily turn on from the off season that we've had, Jordan. This was an unbelievably tragic off season as well since our last episode, and certainly can't have this first episode of the year without reflecting a bit on just the tragedy that's left so many heartsick. I mean, two tragedies, and just. I mean, first of all, the plane crash that took the life of Greg Biffle, his family, friends, pilots on the plane. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. It's still hard to process that actually happened. You know, I was flying into Charlotte today and driving up here and seeing the signs, you know, as getting close to Statesville. And I was like, man, I cannot believe, like, it just is unreal. I thought Cletus's video, paying tribute was so touching, and you know, you just got a sense of what Greg meant to him, and you know, man, you know, the family, the kids. I've really, like, legitimately lost sleep over that. I'm sure many have since that time. And then on the heels of that tragedy, you have, you know, the horrible tragedy with Denny Hamlin's family. You know, the fire that broke out at his parents' house ultimately took the life of his dad, hospitalized his mom. I hope she's going to be okay. You know, I haven't heard any updates on that recently, but obviously our thoughts go out to Denny and what he's had to go through. I cannot fathom for Denny the amount of roller coaster stuff that he's had to go through in such a short period of time. I mean, the trauma of the championship loss career-wise is one thing. Then to go right into the trial, and he has what he said is, you know, the biggest win of his career, essentially, right? Like of his life, really. You know, by getting that settlement on their terms, and feeling like, okay, now we're going to end the year on this note, and then to have that happen with his parents is just unreal. Like, I just can't imagine how someone could endure those kind of ups and downs in such a short period of time. So obviously we're thinking of him as well. So yeah, it's just this has been a really rough go. If you're a NASCAR fan lately, taking the whole picture as a whole, I know everybody sort of feels everything in NASCAR, you know, because it's a community, and it's man, it's been a lot, Jordan.
It's been a lot. It's been a rough off season for a lot of reasons, and I tackle your comments. I feel for victims and the families of the plane crash, for the Hamlin family. Man, I just can't imagine that time of year too. You know, Christmas time and their wedding anniversary too, I believe, and the thing you hear so much about Greg Biffle and what he cared about people. He cared about the community. He was somebody who, like, always wanted to kind of pay it forward. And you hear all these stories and everything, and we saw it last year with his efforts up in the mountains of North Carolina and everything, and the relief efforts. It's just awful. I mean, just an awful tragedy on both fronts. You just look for a ray of sunshine and positivity, and NASCAR could certainly use some right now. And it's our hearts go out to all those impacted.
Well, it's certainly everything. The busy, newsy off season didn't leave much of an off season, and as we stand here today on Monday night, by this time tomorrow night, we will have already seen a test at North Wilkesboro. They will be on track for an organizational test. You and I will be heading there in the morning, and we'll be hearing more driver reaction. Of course, we are covering this for The Athletic, and we'll have some reaction posts there for what they've been saying. I have a column there. Jordan's got his behind-the-scenes story there. Please support us. That'd be great. My camera's acting up again.
You don't have a face for camera.
Probably.
It's
I can pretend my hand is talking. And
your hand has got more hair than your head.
Yeah. Anyway, we appreciate you guys for being back with us for another season number 8. And we'll be back, obviously, for more preview podcasts now. We'll be back at it.
I don't know when.
Full time here,
so look for something next week, probably.
Yeah. Anyway, everybody, thanks as always for listening, and we will talk to you next time on The Teardown. See you, everybody.